When I was in my abusive, toxic marriage, I remember thinking on a number of occasions, how have I even got here? How has this even become a thing? I felt that looking back, I was quite a strong, confident person. And so this pattern, repeating pattern of toxic relationships, um, it just completely flummoxed me. And one of the biggest learnings in my toxic relationship journey and my personal development journey that I started in 2009 was it wasn't adulthood that brought those toxic relationships to me. And that was a massive part of learning for me, because it took away the mystery as to why this was happening. And I realized that actually, once I'd started really exploring who I was and being very much more self-aware and understanding and catching the thoughts that were happening, I realized that actually I'd never done that before. I had never established a strong, true concept of myself. I'd never had strong self-worth. I'd never had strong self-belief. And if I had had a feeling about being worthy in some way, then it would often be accompanied with, it's not fair that my parents aren't coming to see my show, because, and then fill in the story. So it's not fair that somebody else doesn't see me as worthy because actually that's really hurt me, is not the same as creating confidence in a strong self-concept. So when I looked back, I could see how the patterns had started. So whether we like it or not, whatever our foundation stone in childhood was, we will build on that unless we become aware of personal development, unless we can become aware of ourselves and not take every single bit of that situation and rebuild it into our adult relationships. So when I look back at my relationship between my parents, my dad was very passive. He could be aggressive on occasion, but you really have to push him to get him to really push back. And there were times that he was clearly very frustrated, but that frustration came out usually at me, not at my mum. So my parents' relationship was, we had one very passive person who wanted to keep the peace and wanted to not deal with whatever real life was throwing at us. And then you've got one person who is very aggressive, very self-absorbed, very obsessed with how they feel and how everybody should kind of bow down to that. And, walk on eggshells essentially. And, we did learn that the better mum was, as in her mood, the happier she was, the better it was for us all. And so we did fight to keep the peace and what have you. But she showed me that women in a relationship shout and get what they want. Sadly, not true. So no, I don't really mean that. What I mean is that, yes, we would all like to get our own way sometimes, but it wasn't healthy. And she taught me that the way to express your dissatisfaction was through shouting and sulking and stomping and all of those things, very childlike things. And I have huge sympathy for that now because she went through a lot in her childhood, which obviously when you're a child, you don't know your parents' story. You don't even think about your parents' story. It's just not a thing. So for me, starting to work out, how did this pattern happen? Where did it begin? And I came to something really, really key. Firstly, it doesn't start in adulthood. And secondly, we are massive storytellers. We've been storytellers since the age of time. We tell stories as cautionary tales. We tell stories, although I never really got the idea of fairy tales being your child's bedtime story, because most of them are horrific. Most of them are really tragic and awful. So we did also create stories for people to go to sleep. We created stories that we call history. We don't really know how much of our historical facts are true. We can only gather the evidence from lots of different sources and try and piece it together. And sometimes that becomes very controversial. So we don't know everything. So we fill in the gaps with stories, or the most likely thing based on our knowledge and understanding at the time. So it's no great surprise then if we build stories in our own heads. We create stories from a bit of information that we had. So, for example, in my childhood, I had gone from being part of a team with my mum and dad to being very much the rank outsider. Um, I made that mean that my parents didn't love me anymore and I'd done something terribly wrong. So spent my entire time after that people pleasing, and then every so often just completely having a meltdown over not really understanding and not comprehending what was happening. But the reality was my parents were going through a challenging time. My mum was being diagnosed with an ongoing illness. She has MS and has done since she was about 36. So I was around 9 or 10 at the time. So she was going through all of that. My dad wasn't coping with it very well. He was very passive and, like I said, ignored things that were happening that were straight in front of him. So when my mum told me what was happening, once she got all the answers, which was several years into this journey, I then became the emotional prop for her. I became the person that she would come to with her problems. And by this point, I was 11 or 12 years old, so definitely not in a position to carry that kind of load. So, but my childhood taught me that my thoughts weren't enough. I shouldn't be considered. Always keep yourself in a safe position when you have got a challenging person that you're dealing with. Shouting gets what you want. Shouting is part of any relationship that you have. And, I look back and I think I can see the choices that were made by me based on what my default story is. So what I would say is one of the best things to do is to go through your childhood and put in almost like a timeline all of the major events that happened in your life. So, for example, any relationship changes with your parents. So if your parents got divorced when you were 4, for example, when you went to play school, when you went to school, when you went to senior school, any big memories that happened, and things. And what you'll do is you'll start to piece together a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. I'm not suggesting you can sit down and do this in one go, but if you put all of the things in, it includes things like moving house, it includes if mum or dad got a new boyfriend or girlfriend, it includes big holidays that you had together, that you have memories of and what have you. It includes that time in class where you got told off and you were completely humiliated, those sorts of memories that can kind of lead to this. And, as you start to piece together your childhood story, you will start to see how some of your patterns now were created. It will also include, so I'm just thinking off the top of my head, it will also include things like when your siblings were born, that would have made a change to the dynamic of the relationship that you have. And you'll start to piece together where things came from. And the biggest strength when you're going through this personal development and healing from toxic relationships is that when you understand where something happened, where the source point of that was, then you understand why you do things now and you can make decisions. And one of the main powerful parts about this, in that you can make decisions, is that you then see that that story was created by somebody who was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. It doesn't have the same weight to it as you thinking that it's an adult saying it. So for most people, the niggly voices in your head will either be an adult from your past or your voice. And because it's your voice as an adult, you don't consider the fact that actually it's a child who made decisions in a childhood. So they were not emotionally mature enough to understand the concept of what the story was that might go behind it. So for a really long time, probably from about 10 to about 32, I believed that although I was an only child, my parents didn't really like me very much. They loved me out of duty because I was their daughter, but didn't really like or respect me. My feelings didn't matter. My parents would comment on my life and my choices extensively that made me feel I couldn't make life choices myself. I'm not going to lie, I made some really pony life choices, but they were my choices and they were never discussed. They were commented on. It was like I had this commentary of my life all the time. And it was better for me if I was doing what my parents wanted. And so that created not just a seed, but a whole garden of rubbish in my head that made me feel like I couldn't be who I wanted to be. And that is the super important point. If you've got layer upon layer upon layer of not feeling good enough, so you could have a sibling who needed care, so their feelings and thoughts came first. And I'm not saying any of these are unreasonable. I'm just trying to show you what the layers will look like. So you had that. Then you also had your parents who split up. Then you also had a sibling who was much louder than you or was born after you, and they were the youngest one, so the baby of the family. And your dad sometimes didn't turn up when it was time for you to go and see him for the weekend. And then your teacher used to really pick on you at school. All of these things are going to just constantly layer up, not good enough. Plus, your brain doesn't want to find you the opposite of what it is you're searching for. So if you are feeling like you're not good enough and you're searching for the thoughts and the feelings that show you you're not good enough, every time something happens like that, your brain's going to go, see, I told you you're not good enough. See, I told you you're not good enough. And you build up this massive, massive evidence bank until you have all of the things backed up. And then you tell yourself constantly, all throughout this, more harsher, more challenging every time, you are not good enough. So you then attract things that are not good enough as well. You attract more of that in your life. So there are ways to get through this, and this is what I help my clients to do. So if you have a look in the notes, you will find that there is a link to more information about me. I would love for you to have a look at that and tell me what you think of the idea of us working together on healing your toxic past so that you can understand how to move forward to happiness and spark so much more joy in your life. I cannot tell you how much my life has changed since I did this work. There's nothing I ask my clients to do that I wouldn't do or haven't done myself. So have a look, and as and when you're ready, I am right here for you. Take care.